When you love a mind like Newton's, you don't walk beside it, you orbit it, until either you burn away or disappear completely. I still remember the first time I met Isaac. No, it wasn't under candlelight or during some formal scientific assembly. Nor was it the kind of romantic encounter you read about in fiction. It was in the autumn of 1665, during the height of the Great Plague. Cambridge had shut its doors, and students had fled the city. I, the daughter of a modest apothecary in Grantham, had returned home too, where my father's small shop became a refuge for those seeking herbal relief. Isaac, meanwhile, had taken to isolation like a fish to water. In the attic of his mother's countryside estate, he surrounded himself with prisms, lenses, mirrors, and papers full of scribbles I could hardly understand then. My brother Thomas, a friend of Newton from school, would bring news of his strange experiments and solitary obsessions. His chasing light, Thomas would say with a smile. Literally. It was through Thomas that I met him. Not at a ball. Not at a market. But during a delivery of powdered rhubarb root to the Newton household. Isaac answered the door himself. His eyes were deep, not in color but in thought, as though he wasn't looking at me but through me, measuring something only he could calculate. He took the package, muttered a thank you, and then paused. "Are you the apothecary's daughter?" "Yes," I replied. "And you must be the philosopher who makes the air smell like sulfur and the attic glow at night." He laughed, genuinely. It was the first time I saw his human side. In the weeks that followed, we saw more of each other. He would ask about herbs. Not for medicine, but for alchemical properties. He spoke of gravity, light, and time, not like a man reciting theories, but like someone trying to tame the laws of nature themselves. At first, I found his intensity fascinating. He showed me how sunlight split into colors through a prism and then explained that color itself might not be what we think it is. That white light was not pure, but a mixture. He would say things like, "Reality is an illusion until we measure it," and I would nod, pretending to understand, half in awe, half in confusion. But science wasn't all he spoke of. In rare, quiet moments, he would mention his childhood, his absent father, his cold mother, the loneliness of being too clever in a world that mistrusted curiosity. Those were the only times he seemed vulnerable. I suppose those moments are what made me fall for him. The engagement wasn't grand. There was no formal proposal, no ring. It was more of a mutual understanding. One day he said, "I think we function well together. Perhaps we should make it official." It wasn't poetry, but it was Isaac. I agreed. But something inside me paused. He had passion, yes, but it wasn't for me. It was for truth, for the invisible mechanics of the universe. I was merely orbiting him, like the apple he theorized would always fall toward the earth. As our engagement wore on, I noticed changes in him. His mood would swing wildly depending on the success or failure of his experiments. He built devices I didn't understand, a reflecting telescope, a pendulum clock, a strange machine that measured temperature using alcohol and mercury. Sometimes he wouldn't sleep for days. Once, he stared into the sun until he damaged his eyes, just to study how light worked. When I protested, he said, "To understand nature, one must suffer as it does." I began to fear that he didn't love the world, he wanted to conquer it. And I wanted to live in it. One day, he didn't come down for meals. When I went up to the attic, I found papers everywhere. Equations, circles, diagrams of celestial orbits. And one page stood out, laws of motion. He was redefining how the world worked, on paper. He didn't notice me standing there. He didn't even know I'd been crying. He whispered, "I think I've found it. The reason things move." It wasn't the moment I knew he was a genius. I already knew that. It was the moment I realized I was in love with a man who would never look at me the way he looked at falling objects. And so began the quiet unraveling. It was the autumn of 1672 when everything between Isaac and me began to shift. After our secret engagement, I had imagined a life filled with companionship, shared intellect, and the thrill of discovery. But instead of a romantic journey, I found myself spiraling into the vast, impersonal universe that Isaac inhabited, one ruled not by love, but by laws. Isaac was no ordinary man. I had always known that. But I never truly understood how deeply married he already was, to science. He would spend hours locked in his study at Trinity College, drawing diagrams of celestial mechanics, mapping invisible forces with charcoal on parchment, and scribbling formulae that resembled divine incantations more than mathematics. One evening, I brought him supper, bread, roasted duck, and plum wine. He didn't even look up. "Eliza," he muttered, "do you realize the moon does not fall because the force pulling it towards the earth is precisely balanced by its motion?" "I suppose I hadn't considered that," I replied quietly, setting down the tray. "Then you must understand. It's all connected. The apple falling from the tree, it's the same force that holds the heavens in orbit." He grabbed my hand, ink-stained and trembling with excitement. "Don't you see, Eliza? I'm on the verge of describing the universe itself." In that moment, I should have been proud. But I felt distant. A spectator, not a partner. Over the weeks, our conversations faded. When I tried to speak of music, art, or our future home, Isaac would reply distractedly or not at all. He built a prism in his window to study sunlight, blocking out the world outside. Our letters grew colder, filled with mechanical explanations rather than affection. One letter read, "Dear Eliza, I've constructed a new telescope using a curved mirror. It may confirm my theory of light corpuscles. This is urgent. We must delay our visit to Grantham." Another simply said, "I have discovered a new calculus to describe motion. Marriage must wait." It wasn't just neglect, it was obsession. Isaac began conducting bizarre experiments on himself. He would stare at the sun for minutes at a time, trying to understand how light entered the eye. Once, I walked into his chamber to find him pressing a long, curved needle behind his own eyeball to test retinal response. I screamed. He only said, "Don't be hysterical, Eliza. I must know how vision works." My heart broke more with each passing week. His discoveries, the laws of motion, the reflective telescope, the theory of colors, they were magnificent. But they came at a cost: human connection, love, warmth. And then came the day I found the hidden notebook. It was filled with strange symbols, alchemy, astrology, the occult. He was searching not just for the laws of motion, but for the philosopher's stone. Eternal knowledge. Divine power. That night, I confronted him. "You are losing yourself, Isaac." I loved the man who marveled at the stars, not the one trying to replace God. He looked at me with cold logic, not emotion. "Eliza, I cannot stop. If I do not pursue truth to its very end, then what am I?" "You're human," I whispered. "And you'll lose everything that makes you one." He turned away. I walked out that night. No letters. No goodbyes. Only silence. And though history may remember Isaac Newton as the father of modern science, I remember him as the man who chose gravity over love. I never imagined that a falling apple could create a void between two people, but perhaps it was never about the apple at all. After that fateful night in the observatory, where Isaac chose silence over solace and science over love, I gave him space, hoping he'd realize love isn't a distraction, it's an anchor. But the more I waited, the deeper he spiraled into his obsession. He stopped attending social events entirely. Letters arrived for him daily, stamped from France, the Netherlands, even distant Ottoman outposts, all filled with mathematical inquiries or disputations. He replied to none. Instead, he sat night after night surrounded by mirrors, prisms, and gears, trying to build what he called a mechanical memory engine, a machine to replicate the thinking process. "I'm attempting to model cognition through optics," he muttered once. "If the mind is light, I must bend it like a lens." His hands trembled from mercury exposure, his meals went untouched. One evening, I brought him a bowl of soup and found him staring blankly at a pendulum, its tick echoing through the cold stone room. The moment I touched his shoulder, he flinched, like I was breaking his calculation. Isaac, I said gently, you haven't spoken to me in days. Don't you miss me? I cannot miss what I haven't measured, he replied flatly, and time spent on feelings is time unquantified. It broke something in me. That night, I packed the locket he'd given me, a silver oval inscribed with our initials and a miniature sketch of an atom, and left it on his work table. The next morning, I visited Cambridge's registrar and asked them to forward a letter to Isaac. In it, I wrote only this. Some apples fall to the ground and teach the world about gravity. Others fall between two hearts and teach us how love is pulled apart. I returned home. Days passed. Then weeks. No reply. Months later, I heard from a friend in London that Isaac was developing theories about alchemy and time dilation. Ideas no one could quite understand. Some said he was brilliant. Others, mad. And I was neither. Just a woman who had once loved a man who loved the universe more. But I don't hate him. On stormy nights, when thunder shakes the windows, I imagine him calculating lightning's angle or measuring raindrops to find the rhythm of God. Maybe he found what he was looking for. And maybe I was just a variable in his equation, never meant to solve for love. The end.